Getting through it pretty well so far. That's usually a good sign.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting, March 6, 2024. The time is 4 o'clock. This meeting is called to order.
Acting City Attorney Hockola. Here. City Manager Burton.
Here.
Commissioner Dean. Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Turner.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. Welcome and thank you for participating in the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting. We are pleased to be able to provide this alternative meeting format in the city's effort to broaden public participation. Please be patient as we may experience technical difficulties during the meeting. We welcome your public commentary. Please read the following tips and guidelines for the app usage. Commissioners, what say you?
So yesterday during our joint city county work session, Michael O'Neill, who's the executive director of Helena Housing Authority, presented about conducting a fair market rent study. That is part of something that will allow them and private developers to leverage millions of dollars in financing that they otherwise would not be able to garner. So with that, a fair market rent study for our area is going to cost about $100,000. Yesterday, Michael told us that the Department of Commerce is willing to contribute $20,000, and Helena Housing Authority can contribute another $20,000 towards that. There was an ask of the city and county to consider partnering on helping put together the rest of the funding. I think that we have it within our current budget authority to do something like that. During that discussion, Michael talked about how it is truly critically important that this happens more or less immediately, because the Housing and Urban Development federal agency has the process to reevaluate fair market rents starting in August, and we don't want to miss the opening for that deadline to get a firm to do the study conducted, and for that our share would be about $25,000 to $30,000. It would allow Helena Housing Authority to leverage an additional about $6.5 to $8.5 million more in financing, not to mention the millions of dollars in financing that private developers for low-income housing would be able to leverage. So with that, I'm wondering if maybe the city manager could let us know if we do have the budget authority and what next steps could be, if there is consensus today from the commission to start moving that forward sooner rather than later.
Yes, Mayor. Yes, please go ahead.
There is budget authority. I've visited with the finance director, Danielson, and we can proceed with at the direction of the commission. And the way to proceed, my recommendation would be that we author a letter for the signature to notify the Helena Housing Authority that will participate to the level of $25,000. And upon the Helena Housing Authority contracting for that service, then they would submit a bill. If the commission is comfortable with that, I'll proceed.
Yes, I think yesterday's meeting, I think we are comfortable. I'm speaking for everybody here today, so we can save time.
Okay.
And if there's any objection, get it.
Very good.
Absolutely.
We'll have a letter for the mayor tomorrow.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay, thank you, Commissioner J. Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council. Representative Jim Zimmerman, you have the floor.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
commissioners and chair. I'm Janet Zimmerman. I'm one of the new people inducted onto the committee. We have 25 of our 28 seats filled at this point. We have approved our budget for 2024. At our last meeting, we had the League of Women Voters come in and give us a presentation on the review of the city government process that's being proposed. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Representative Zimmerman. Questions, comments for the representative? Nothing? Thank you.
Thank you.
City Manager's report.
Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Jake Garson for a brief update on the approach that we plan on taking in terms of education, public safety.
Please, Jake.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Thanks for allowing us to give you a brief update. So the resolution that you all passed a couple of weeks ago to put the mill levy and bond questions on the election ballot for the June 4th primary election. I've been working with Fire and Police Chief and City Attorney on trying to ramp up our website content information as our kind of starting point as we build out a public education campaign to make sure that voters are well informed and well educated when they go to vote on the 4th. I anticipate that in the next couple of weeks, you'll start to see more of that information rolled out as we prepare to likely include a utility bill insert in April and start rolling out, a full social media campaign. I might be soliciting any of you that are interested for recording, some short videos to, again, help inform people on what it is that they're going to be voting on. Further, we have been in discussion with a local consulting firm, Mangan and Binion, Jeff Mangan and Jesse Binion, about the possibility of contracting with them leading up to the election, both to help review the educational materials and provide feedback and advising, but we think more importantly with their background and expertise to be able to help advise us to make sure that we're staying on the right side of the law when it comes to education versus advocacy. We do not have an agreement in place yet, but that's the direction that we're working towards. And so we want to make sure that you're aware of that, is that they would also be a resource for all of you as you get questions and as we, potentially schedule things like public meetings to answer questions and so forth. So we're excited about the opportunity to potentially work with them on this, especially since our plan is to, really try and create content and materials in-house. Our goal is not to spend a lot of money on public consulting for the campaign itself, but we do feel like this could be a useful resource for us as we go through this process.
You bet. Thank you.
And Mayor, I'll just add that, as you know, they're very, very qualified people for this type of engagement. And I think that probably within the next couple of days, they'll be able to firm up that relationship. We'll make sure that you have this contact information.
Great. Comments from you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think I gleaned from your comments, Jake, that there will be opportunity for the public in a meeting setting to ask questions and get some back and forth with our authorities. That's the specifics of the bond and levy efforts.
We haven't finalized any details. We have had that conversation. I had that conversation with Chief Campbell, and I think that in the next couple of weeks, we're going to start solidifying some of those details. But we have talked about, potentially reaching out to the HCC to give a presentation, some of our community groups, and then trying to put on the calendar, one, maybe two actual Q&A type presentation events so the public can come and engage with. Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay.
And Mayor, that concludes my report.
Presentation. In the tunnel mural artwork presentation, Manager Johnston, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Commissioners. Well, today you get to hear something fun from me, unlike our usual ring boilers and such. You know, we've all had the chance to go have ice cream at the carousel and then take a stroll over to Centennial Park. And luckily that time is almost here. But when you've done that, you've even had the luxury to not have to cross traffic. But that walk through the tunnel is a bit dreary and dull. Last year, you saw a beautiful transformation of the Centennial Trail Tunnel. This spring, we will do the same to the Lindale Tunnel. So we had a call for artists in November and December, and we received 19 qualified submissions. You may ask, what makes them qualified? Well, each submission, they had to include a complete submission form, the mural artwork and project description, a letter from the artist addressing their plan to meet the deliverables, their ability to meet the deadline, and their demonstrated ability to undertake projects of a similar scope, as well as a resume, a work plan and schedule, and samples of their previous work. Each submission is then scored using the following criteria based on their merit, their appropriateness of their concept to the location, their ability to meet the timeline. The design must have a potential for limited or no graffiti and vandalism. And of course, just the overall impression of the art. They were scored equally, with each of those being worth 5 points. So the following are the previews of the 19 qualified submissions. I'll just give you guys each a few seconds to view the slides and just let me know if you need a little bit more time or if you'd like us to go back.
Can you go back 1 minute, one step, please? That's serious art there.
My submittal was late, so it's not.
Thank God.
So all of these submissions were juried blindly by the members of the Helena Public Art Committee. They viewed all 19 submissions and then decided on their top 7. We then took a closer look at those top 7, which led to final scoring of those. They're listed here as how they scored them. And then 2, as you can see, were tied for 4th place. So we'll take a closer look at those 7. In 6th place was Poppies, number 14. In 5th place was number 18, Montana Wildlife. One of the submissions in 4th place was What the Meadowlarks Saw. The other submission, 4th place, was number 4, Wildfire. In 3rd place was number 13, Wilderness Symphony. In 2nd place was number 5, Echoes of Connection. And the Helena Public Art Committee's first pick was number 18, Queen of the Rockies. So the Helena Public Art Committee's recommendation is submission number 18. Helena, Queen of the Rockies. I don't know if you can see that, but that top line, which is one tunnel side, actually says Queen City of the Rockies. The recommended artist has demonstrated a great deal of experience to handle a project of this scale. There's some of his artwork in other areas. They also addressed the minimalization of graffiti. And they have a detailed work plan, which includes starting on site May 28th and completing the project on June 14th with a community event. So these have been submitted to you today for your consideration with the plan to award an artist on Monday's commission meeting. That's all I have for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the submissions or the process.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I know that we've never set this in policy before, in terms of like public art and preference for local or. So I'm wondering, are there, of the 7, who is or isn't, which pieces would or wouldn't be by Montana-based artists?
Montana specifically.
Or, I mean, Helena, whatever.
Sure, okay. Well, out of the 19 submissions, 7 were Montana artists. 6 of them for sure are Helena. 1, I'm not quite sure if it's Helena or Wolf Point. Out of those, number 10 in 4th place, Wildfire, is a Helena artist. I don't want to forget somebody, so just double check. Just out of the top 7, only one of them is a local artist.
Yeah, I think in the future, I think it might be worth us considering, I mean, similar that we have like procurement policies for contracting with local vendors. I think it might be worth considering like a preference scoring for local or state artists. Not that these are all beautiful, but just to help encourage our local arts community.
I just want to suggest that if the commission is not comfortable making a decision Monday night, we can put it off a little bit. I know that there are time frames that are accompanying the RFP, so but I just want to make sure that you're comfortable at the point when it's going to be for yes or no.
And then, maybe one more question. Is it accurate that the Man Gulch fire mural, it's the same artist that did the other tunnel?
That is correct, yes. That is number 10. I did forget to mention, I'm sorry, that Max Hay is here. He's the vice chair of the Helena Public Art Committee. So if you have anything for him to say.
That was a big part of the reason that we, in discussion, decided to score that one a little lower and push these other ones up, because giving the same artists 2 big contracts right in a row improved.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I tend to agree with Commissioner Dean's suggestion of a preference for local, not necessarily on this maybe future scoring.
Then that's your preference.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I've got a question. Burton, I agree with the quick statement and question. I agree having a preference for someone who's local or Montana artists. But I know at the state level, for procurement issues, can't put a preference on where purchase or procure items from because it puts us in conflict with the Western States Contracting Alliance. Is there something similar at the local level?
Mayor, Commissioner, I don't think so. And, all the dollar amounts. I think that this has been appropriately vetted through your committee. And, this is just my personal opinion. I think the response was tremendous.
Or work?
Commissioner Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a clarification question. It was a little hard to hear a couple of things. Did I understand correctly that of the top 7, only one of the top 7 is from Montana et al.?
That was correct.
Huh. I would say I agree with Commissioner Dean's perspective. I do think it is important for, these local art projects to have a consideration for local artists. I think it's a great way to celebrate our local art community. So I would like to maybe, as far as voting on Monday, I would be open to a further discussion before making a final decision about how to prioritize local artists in this process. Because I did hear it was blind scoring, but then I think I heard that the local artist was scored lower because her work was recognized, which suggests, I'm not sure how that worked out, but I'd like to maybe be thoughtful about how we use the Public Arts Committee to celebrate local artists. And if that's something that takes another week to do, I would welcome that conversation. Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay, we appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Strategic plan update. Officer Garcia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna zoom. Get the document pulled up to walk through. Not planning on going through the document in its entirety, but did want to kind of walk through a few elements of it. Well, this gets brought up. So just for anybody who's not familiar with what we're talking about today, in last December 2023, the commission along with the city manager hosted a strategic planning retreat that involved members of the leadership team. It was a public meeting, took place over the course of a day and a half to walk through strategic goals of the commission moving forward. It was hosted by the local government center, Montana State University. And at the conclusion of that activity, it was recommended that staff go back through all of the notes that were compiled from the different exercises that everyone that participated in went through and work on a strategic planning document. And so for the past couple of months, I have been working with various members of the leadership team to go through everything that was documented from the retreat. Thanks to clerk of the commission, Danae Claiborne. She was able to put everything down on paper for us. And then we went through the process of summarizing everything, really reviewing the information and trying to give appropriate context to it. There were some ideas that came from it that were very vague. In general, there were some things that were, very well spelled out. And so what we did not do in this process is create material that did not come from the strategic planning retreat. So there aren't any, new action items or strategies associated with goals that were not talked about in the retreat itself. So I'll walk through a couple elements of the document just so you have an idea of why the information that is in here. Part of the discussion during the retreat was incorporating the governing principles, which are on the wall in the commission chambers. And so you will see that documented here in the strategic planning document. There were also 4 core values that were discussed as kind of guiding principles for the work that staff do every day and for the decisions that the commission makes. And so we did incorporate the core values that were discussed as a part of this document as well. As we get into the strategic goals, if you remember, there were four goals that were identified. Maintain and improve city services to residents, holistic commercial and residential development, maintain and improve city infrastructure, and being the employer of choice. And so as we took down all of the action items that came from the different activities that you all were a part of, they were grouped into goals that felt that were appropriate. And so then moving to the back section of the document, we tried to capture not only the action items, what resources we anticipate would be required to move these things forward, whether it's staff, commission decisions, budget, approximate timeframes, and then the various departments that would be engaged in moving these actions forward. You will notice on page 9, under the maintain and improve city infrastructure, there were a number of action items or ideas that as staff discussed, how, I guess, the context that we had for these action items. Some of them recognize have already been complete or was processed through the end of last year. So rather than removing them, we marked them as complete, knowing that there may have been additional context that you had in mind as those were brought forward. And if they truly are complete, we felt it was important to note that those things have been accomplished. And with that, City Manager, I don't know if you have any other thoughts you want to add.
Mayor, just briefly, if I may, I think that it would be good if you had time to look this over. I would probably like to put it onto like the next administrative agenda and discuss amongst yourselves. Once you're comfortable with the content, have made suggested changes, then we'll bring it across the hallway and ask for official adoption.
You bet. Comments or questions from the commission?
So yes, Mr. Mayor, would it be more helpful for us to maybe email you our individual thoughts on, like, said going through it already?
I think that would be very important. And our contact with the industry.
Okay. Comments from the commission? Do you have any public comments on this topic? Madam Clerk, any online?
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Okay, we'll move along. Thank you. Department reports, ARPA, General Fund Savings Agreement Update. Administrator Opitz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My report today is brief. As we went through the allocation process for the community aid grants, we made a promise to you that we would bring those agreements back in front of the commission for approval. Our plan is to do that on Monday. In your packet are the individual agreements for the Business Improvement District restroom project, the Exploration Works Educational Lab expansion, the Helena Regional Sports Association's sustainability study, and the Friendship Center property acquisition allocation. If you have any questions related to any of those agreements, there are several of those groups have folks in the room to provide updates. Additionally, we do have 2 pending agreements. The Family Promise Client Services Shelter Project, they are in the process of putting together their plans for submittal for a shelter at their current location on Cook Street. So there's, as soon as that full scope and that project is underway, we will get an agreement in place. You'll recall the original application that they submitted was for a property acquisition for a new shelter location. So we wanted to make sure that we got an appropriate scope of work before we move forward with that agreement. And then the allocation for Good Samaritan Ministries. Of course, I think many in the room are aware, Good Samaritan Ministries original location for Ruth's Place is no longer available. So they are in the process of trying to secure a new location for that project. I know Teresa's in the room if you have any questions specific to that, but other than that, we'll be bringing these forward on Monday for approval.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Administrator Opitz. I'm wondering, with regard to the two pending proposals, and I know I'm a bit more familiar with the Good Samaritan situation, that it is truly pending a location, but it sounds as if there may be sort of a, what might be called a fundamental change of circumstances or a significant change to what was originally proposed. So I'm wondering if before we get to draft contract, if we could just get an update on, what will the differences be with the new proposals? Because I think once a contract is drafted, it's the horse is already out of the barn. But if there are fundamental changes to what was originally proposed, I would prefer to have the opportunity to sort of review that and have a discussion before we move to contract. I don't know if the rest of the commission feels the same, but that is something I would be interested in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission?
I guess I know there are a couple. I wonder if we could maybe just get, I think there's just two.
Do we have any
John
public
and
comments?
Teresa.
Any public comments on this topic? Do we have any online, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Mr. Tigger, are you prepared to give us an update?
So there are a couple of things going on with us. We are still waiting to hear for the RFP that we applied for the May Butler building. We're also looking, just in case that wouldn't come through, what our options are going to be. I'm concerned. I know we need to really find something and get it in place. But it's not easy right now. So we'll see. We will need, that would be a great location, because then we could do two programs in there that are opposite each other time services. So we're just kind of waiting to hear what we see. We can't do anything till we know at this point.
Mr. Dendy, you want to give an update on the bathroom?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. John Dendy, Director of the Business Improvement District. We brought a proposal before the City County Parks Board to put a Portland Loo at Constitution Park. Rather than approve that and send it to the full commission, they requested that we go through a public process. Subsequently, Director Doug Smith of Parks, I asked him for a written list of what that would entail, and he did provide that. It's the full process, pretty extensive, with 2 notices 7 days apart and a press release, direct mailings to downtown, and summarize that to the BID board, and then again to the Parks Board, and then hopefully before the full commission. So that's where that stands.
Thank you. Any others? Thanks. Administrator Opitz. Dated City of Helena Water Treatment Master Plan. Nate Wassenberger. You have the floor. Director Leland, you have the floor.
Mayor Commission, just before we turn it over to our consultant from AE2S, Nate Weisenberger, I just wanted to kind of give a picture of what's going to or why are we doing this. This is for asset management and to know what the city has, what condition it is, and then go into the future of where we need to be. So we do master plans periodically. We try to do it every 5 to 10 years. We're trying to get caught up on all of them. We previously did a distribution system, a master plan for water, a storage analysis to make sure that do we need to increase our storage and where we need to increase our storage. And we're currently doing the facility plan where Ben Rigby is the superintendent, and he is also managing the two plants that we have and the water system. And then we are doing wastewater with other consultants too. So we are trying to get all of them brought up to speed and where we need to be. So at this point, I'll just turn it over to Nate Weisenberg.
Mayor, do you care if I stand?
Not at all, sir.
Mayor, commissioners, staff, guests. Here today to talk to you about the water treatment facilities and how they interact with your system and how you're poised for the future, and also what you currently have. So just an outline of what I plan to talk about today. We'll talk a little bit about the limitations and challenges of your system. I do have a slide though that it will commend your situation on supply, and I'll get into that quite a bit. But you do have three primary sources of water. You have the 10-mile water treatment plants. We'll go have an overview of that, the Eureka well, and then your Missouri River water treatment plant. Talk a little bit about how you're poised for growth and expansion, and then go over some of the short and long-term improvements that we identified for your treatment works and supply. Not to belabor this with a big table here, but what I want to do is just point out these three bullets. So if you look at the Missouri River source, you are contracted with the Bureau of Reclamation from Canyon Ferry Reservoir for about 11,300 acre feet. I believe Manager Burton was responsible for negotiating that contract. That's a huge thumbs up. If I consider the communities in high mountain areas, specifically Rocky Mountain states, where water is somewhat limited, especially with some of the impacts of climate, the city of Helena is probably one of the best poised cities that I've worked with in terms of having a robust and resilient, sustainable water source. With the amount that you have from Canyon Ferry, that is equivalent to about 10.1 million gallons per day if you were to use it equally each day. The Missouri River plant you only use during your peak months. And so what that means is that you do have a lot of additional water capacity for the future as you continue to grow and extend your use into the Missouri River facility. The 10-mile water treatment plant is on, well, the Missouri River plant is on the north east side of the community. The 10-mile plant is west, up in the source is up in by Rimini. So you have a similar amount of water volume there. And because of the water quality of that source and the ability to treat it for much less, you do tend to use that facility much more. But you have about 11,700 acre feet there. The one source that we mentioned is that Eureka well. It's a relatively small source, but you are doing an improvement project on that source, and just to incrementally increase the volume there. But you also have a lot of potential for additional groundwater down in the kind of closer to the Missouri River plant. And so I'll get into that a little bit, but that really is a huge indicator of when you would ever have to do something at the Missouri River plant to increase capacity. And so if I get into this in a little bit more detail of the three water sources in your treatment facilities, with respect to 10-mile water treatment plant, it's a 9 million gallon per day facility. So on a daily basis, you have the ability to push 9 million gallons per day through that source. It does not have necessarily the most robust treatment process with respect to particulate, or as you know, if you consider when water rushes down the creek, it picks up a lot of particulate. It doesn't have the ability to really respond well to those types of events. And so that is one of the shortcomings associated with the facility that we are plan to identify through the improvement list that we have. But in terms of quality, those other times of the year, outside of maybe a week or two, the 10-mile source is absolutely a pristine source. It's a very high quality. And the beauty of that source is really the only thing you need to do to treat it is add a little bit of chemical, run it through filters, and then everything is served into the community by gravity. So it's a very economical source based on the numbers that were provided to us, about 14 cents per 1,000 gallons to treat and deliver to the community. If you look at the Eureka well, again, it's a little bit more limited in terms of its capacity. It does have a little bit higher hardness. And so in terms of, the calcium and magnesium concentrations, it's a little bit higher. I think Ben says he gets in trouble with the Blackfoot Brewery a little bit when they get some Eureka well water, but more or less it's still considered high quality. But you are considering using some of the Orofino spring rates in order to increase that capacity from about 0.7 million gallons per day up to about 1 million gallons per day. And even though it's a little bit more expensive to treat, because it takes a little bit of energy to pump the water out of the ground, it is still a very economical source. The Missouri River plant, while it, I said relatively poor water quality, don't assume that that's poor. What it just means is in relative to what you have at 10 Mile, it's not quite as good, but it's still a relatively high quality and a very good water source. And probably the most valuable part of having the Missouri River is how big that source is and how sustainable Canyon Ferry Reservoir is in terms of a place for you to get water. If the city ever did need to do something major in terms of expansion, because you have that ability to we have a lot more water capacity there to use, and you have the ability to double the contract with the Bureau of Reclamation, the Missouri River plant or that Missouri River source is really your future source of water for growth. And so what we did was we looked at each of those 3 facilities. And then what we did was we looked at the equipment that's there. We looked at how old the systems are, the condition that the facilities are in. We looked at what regulations are in place, what regulations might be coming up in the near future, how your facilities can manage the current regulations and future regs. And then we also looked at growth, both in terms of what you have and what you potentially, or what you have as far as supply and what you have as far as treatment capacity, which are 2 different numbers. So if I look at the 10 Mile water treatment plant first, how you get water into the 10 Mile plant is you have a couple of reservoirs up high in the watershed, and then you have a series of creeks and a flume that deliver that water to a pipeline that then follows Rimonite Road down to your treatment facility. So everything, for the most part, is just run by gravity and gates. And so as you need more water, the operators go up and turn gates and get more water into the plant. And when you don't need it, they shut the gates down. One thing that is somewhat difficult is that it's a little bit of an adventure for the staff to access some of that information from time to time. It's not there's not like it's not accessible with motorized vehicles per se. So there's a lot of effort to hike up that way or use 4-wheelers to get up there to kind of see what's going on up in the. And so one of the items that we identified was putting some monitoring equipment up there into the sources and being able to see things digitally and make decisions rather than having to rely on boots on the ground, even though sometimes eyes are better than digital as well. There would probably be some trust but verified type activities if that came through. But the one thing I will mention is that concrete pipeline it could be considered a weak link if it did fail, because that is, it conveys the water to your treatment facility. So we did identify that as a potential asset that could be critical, but for the condition that it's in, that the supply network you have at 10 Mile is in pretty good shape. As I mentioned, with respect to the water quality, I would say probably 48 to 50 weeks out of the year, that plant is just humming right along. For those couple of weeks when you have a runoff event or something like that, that plant does struggle a little bit. And so what we identified was potentially enhancing the ability for the plant to remove solids from the water. And so we looked at a couple of different options. One was putting a settling pond up in the basin onto some property that the city owns along Rimonite Road, or we looked at potentially putting a new facility right next to your current one that would have a little bit more robust ability to remove turbidity or improve the clarity of the water. Based on some of the back and forth that we had with the city, even though it doesn't cost necessarily a lot of money to put a pond up on, or like a settling pond up in the basin. However, the logistics of that, now you have another remote site up there. You're really kind of hoping for nature to run its course. One of the major issues that Ben is fearful of is a forest fire. And so the ash load that would potentially come down, that type of treatment system may not necessarily be what it would need to be in order to maintain regulations. And so what we did was we proposed an on-site pretreatment facility. So much higher capital cost. However, if you're going to consider that it's going to be somewhat of a better option for your operators to have more control over that system, that's where we made our recommendation. The other thing it does is currently you have what's called a contact absorption clarifier, and that's the treatment technology that doesn't work really well for high turbidity events. If you put that facility next to your water treatment plant, you could harness that space that's currently occupied by those clarifiers and place additional filters in that footprint. And that would give the plant some ability, operational flexibility to run the system much better in terms of when they backwash a filter, they take one offline, the flow increases 33% to the others. Filters don't like to be fluctuated real quickly like that. And so if you had a couple spare filters up there, it would make that facility much more robust in terms of being able to meet the water quality challenges that are there. And so this is what that facility looks like. And so the 10-mile water treatment plant is shown right here. These are some ponds at the site. So when I mentioned the backwash process from the filters, you also, with those clarifiers, there's some residuals that are blown down off the bottom. Those are collected in the ponds. What we would propose is to put that pretreatment building or that turbidity removal facility right adjacent to your system. It would intercept the water off the raw water transmission line, treat it, and then divert it back into the filters of your current plant. So it's not very invasive with respect to what you have already. As I mentioned, once you have the treated water, you have a covered storage tank that just the water level is maintained in there, and then it's sent by transmission main to the community. This is a 3D rendering. We're currently working on a filter improvements project for the city. What we did is we basically took your facility, made a 3D rendering of it. When I mentioned that you could potentially get some footprint back, this is the area of those contact absorption clarifiers. If you were able to remove those, you can see that it's about the same area as your 4 filters. And so you could add a couple of filters here, which would not give you increased capacity, but it would give you a lot more redundancy at the facility and make it more sustainable. With respect to the Eureka well, you have another consultant that is working on this project, but basically it's to take that facility from 0.7 million gallons per day to 1 million gallons per day, making some chemical feed improvements, and then making sure that system can be a little bit more flexible with respect to your distribution network. On the Missouri River plant, as I had talked about this one, so if you think about your 10-mile plant as your base plant, that plant is running, pretty much all year long, providing the base flow for the community. Once you experience your increased demands in the May and June timeline, this is when the Missouri River plant starts to fire up and be operational. With respect to the transmission line that services the Missouri River plant, this green line represents where the city thinks the transmission pipeline is. There aren't very good records on that. The pipeline is capable of meeting the capacity of the Missouri River plant, but if you ever had to expand the treatment capacity, that pipeline is only capable of 10 million gallons per day. So if you needed more capacity, you'd need another transmission pipeline or a bigger one. We just developed a couple routes here for that pipeline system. Basically, it's, you have a similar situation up at 10 Mile with a single transmission line for raw water. You do have a similar system here, albeit the pipeline system here is in pretty good shape as well. When I mentioned the development of groundwater, the city also has a project ongoing to develop groundwater within, kind of closer to the airport over by the Missouri River plant, up to and about 3 million gallons per day. And so when you think about if you're going to have to expand your supply network, if you are able to pursue more groundwater, at this location or others, it just staves off the need to expand your facilities with respect to the Missouri River plant. And so you're currently pursuing a portion of the 6,000 acre foot right through that project. The nice thing about that is if you did develop the groundwater through this process and deliver it to the Missouri River plant, you do then have a conduit for that water to be collected and then pushed into the distribution system at that location. So it's a relatively convenient supply that the city is pursuing, and much less costly as you think about, what it takes to treat surface water as opposed to groundwater. This is a busy slide, and I do apologize for that. But in essence, then what we looked at is if the city did need to expand its treatment systems, what would that look like in terms of taking the Missouri River plant from 10 million gallons per day to, something more than that, or potentially, if the Missouri River plant was built in the 1950s, some equipment is aging, some equipment, we did asset management lists for Ben, so he can manage his equipment and, make change outs as necessary moving forward. But the bones of the facility, meaning the concrete and the structure itself, is in pretty good shape. So, and that's not uncommon for systems that were built in the 50s and 60s, such as this. And so the plant still has a lot of useful life in it, probably more than, 20, almost maybe 50 years, depending on, things that might happen. But what we're saying is that if you do need to expand this, it is very, there's a plan in place to be able to do that. There's also a plan in place to address some of the taste and odor issues that may be necessary when the 10 Mile plant is operational. The Missouri River plant fires up. There are some people that notice the water quality difference, especially on that north and east side of town. And so while Ben has been actively, finding ways to control those taste and odor problems by the use of powdered activated carbon or other means, if there was something that you wanted to do something more robust to provide a more equitable water quality across the system, there are plans in place to address that with this concept. So really to address the growth and expansion then, what you see here is, with your current maximum day demand of about 17.3 million gallons per day, and what you have in place, you can still serve an additional 750 ERUs. And if you do get that additional 3 million gallons per day of wells, you can see that additional service to new users or growth amongst the communities is closer to 4,000 ERUs. And if you're able to push that, if you're able, then if and when you did the Missouri River expansion, you can see that you would have another 11,000 ERUs to serve. So when I say that you have a very robust water supply, that's why. Like you can serve a large population that's comprised in that 11,000 ERUs. It just, like I said, a lot of the growth communities that I work with are not in this position. So kudos to the city of Helena for having such a large supply. And not only that, but having multiple sources is great, because if one source is compromised, you still have the others. So we did put together the capital improvement list. The groundwater development is probably the big one from the Missouri River site at about 8 million. But when you consider 3 MGD and how many users that could potentially serve with the water quality that you get, that's a good deal. The pre-treatment facility at 10 Mile is maybe a little bit delayed into 26, but that's about a $10 million improvement. And then there's some other smaller items to address along the way, but those are the two in the short term period of time that we identified as prudent to consider. On a longer term basis, once you did get that pretreatment facility done, you know, you would have the ability to make 10 Mile a little bit more robust in terms of those filters. If you wanted to add those, and then, you know, basically I would say, you know, items 2 through 5 are probably driven by performance. You know, how are those older pieces of equipment doing at the Missouri River plant? Are they still, you know, humming along like from the assessment? And also, you know, how is your groundwater development happening? Are there triggers that could potentially require you to sink more eggs into the Missouri River basket as opposed to not down the road? And so that's a brief overview. I know I went quickly, although I maybe took a little more time than you wanted, but available for any questions if you have.
Thank you. Thank you for that update, Nate. And Burton.
Mayor, I would just add that part of the information, I believe that we're 18 or 20 years in zero rec contract for 40 years. And that contract is renewable for another 40 years. So we've got that contracted for the next 60 years.
Yes, please.
Mr. Mayor, 3 questions. Mr. Weisenberger, first, thank you for the presentation. Very informative. Is it possible to get this PowerPoint?
Mayor Commission, yes, I have it and I can send it out. And we have hard copies of the executive summary and the master plan itself, if you guys would like.
Thank you. Second question. Don't know that I heard you talk a lot about the flume on the 10 Mile system, and I was just kind of curious as to your thoughts of it as a limitation.
Mayor, commissioners, I didn't talk a lot about the flume. I believe the city does have a project in the works to, it's a little bit of a rat's nest because it's a historical structure. Several years ago, I got thrown onto the historical committee for the American Water Works Association Montana section. And I asked for a bunch of old photos and I got a lot of pictures of the Red Mountain flume. Just for that reason that it's a pretty cool structure, but there are some headaches in terms of being able to do a lot of work to it for that reason. But I do know that based on our conversations with the city staff, they are looking at ways to maintain that flume and keep it in service and keep it operational. But it does lose quite a bit of water, and so they're addressing that too.
And Mr. Mayor, the third question, when you talked about the 2 possible options for dealing with sort of the turbidity in the 10 Mile system, one you said was a lower capital cost and the other was higher. How much difference between the 2?
Fairly dramatic. I would say 2 million versus 10. And so when we, sorry, Mayor, commissioners, when we reported our information to the city, Jamie Clark, here in the engineering department or public works was pretty quick to point out, this doesn't pencil out, and it's absolutely right, it doesn't. There's no way for us to mathematically say that the improvements project of a pretreatment building at the 10 Mile facility versus a pond is better. So our recommendation is not necessarily based on the hard capital and operational costs. It's more based on the benefits of having that facility be closer to where the operators are so they can babysit it. It's not remote that way. They also have the ability then to take that area that I mentioned where those clarifiers are right now, remove them, and then put 2 additional filters in. And those additional filters give that plant more redundancy. And I forgot to mention, I apologize for this, the system, your staff gave us some desire to be able to recycle backwash water. And so when your filters get dirty because they remove that sediment from the water, you take water and you pump it backwards through, and you kind of mix the media up, and then that water that comes off is called backwash water, and it's highly turbid. And so those ponds settle that turbidity out, and then your current system, that water is sent to discharge back into 10 Mile Creek. there was some desire, instead of losing that water, to bring it back to the head of the plant. And so one of the benefits of having your pretreatment system on site right there is for the ability to do that. So you're actually gaining some water rights or some water supply, you know, based on the concept. So when I mentioned that, you know, 2 million versus 10, and I really don't know that there's a guarantee that the $2 million option would work all the time as well as the other one would. There's all of those ancillary benefits that we identified that then forced us to recommend the higher cost option.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
And one other point that we'd add that we did look at is if and when we get a fire up there, the one up higher that was the cheaper option of the settling pond is there was a lot of questions if that would even work. And so that's why the recommendation kind of went with the plant that is there. We can get that to work when there's a fire and we have ash. So that was also played into the considerations too.
Any other? Yes, please.
Right. So as I've learned the last few years, everything with water and wastewater is always very expensive. So how do we take this master plan and how does it integrate into our budget conversation starting the next couple months, or does it right now?
Mayor, Commissioner, is what we hired a firm to come in and do our rate study. This was our previous master plans, and then this one was put in place to be able to go forward with new rate increases. And then we look at it if we're going to do rate increases and pay for it with cash, or some of these bigger ones, we have to go out to bonds and amortize the costs out through the years. So that was already looked at with our rate study. And then they gave us a program that we can look at to be able to do those type of situations. And we will be talking about rate increases for the water and wastewater. But also included in that is ARPA, where we got $13 million included in that. So all of that is going to be thrown into this program, and then it'll spit out how we should do things. And then through staff and Sheila's department, we'll be able to ground truth it and say, nah, we need to either back off or we need to go and get these type of increases.
And that'll be part of these budget conversations.
Any other comments from the commission? Do we have any public comments on this topic? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your presentation. City of Helena Code Amendment Sidewalk Placement. Director Kanopi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. So the 742, as we discussed, the widening of the streets, come with a to remove that 1 foot offset from the property line and other. So, under 742, and we'll get it up to the purpose statement was rewritten to just basically broaden it and clarify it. You know, the purpose of the city is to build sidewalks to provide a connected system for those walking and for those with disabilities traveling across the city. In addition, the city aims for boulevard sidewalks allow for traffic calming and separation from the roadway and large storage, and cleaner streets. So in section 1A, that's the section where we're removing the 1 foot from the property line so that the right-of-way width for the local street doesn't go from 60 to 62 feet. So this is keeping it under the 10. 1B, this is the section that we previously discussed. Instead of bringing all these sidewalk variances to the commission, which does take a little bit of extra time, and we're proposing that go to the city manager's office. That the city manager's office may grant the variance to sidewalk placement location. Basically the same language. The only thing other than that would be if a variance is required, is denied, the owner could appeal to the city commission for consideration. Section C, where previously the city manager was allowed to grant minor deviations to the sidewalk placement site, like meandering or to accommodate immovable objects like a transformer or power pole. To kind of keep with the hierarchy there, this was moved down to actually my position to be able to grant those minor deviations. The other one was item F. This was kind of alluded to in the current code, but we felt it was a little ambiguous, so we wanted to clarify it. So if the major renovation of a principal structure occurs as determined by the city, the owner must construct sidewalks that comply with current sidewalk engineering and ADA standards, even where sidewalks were already constructed. This is to bring those sidewalk pieces that are non-compliant back into compliance with, major renovation, which we've already been doing that. We've been working with property owners. It just makes sense to make sure that those things are brought up. The city code is adjacent property owners are required to maintain the current standards. And then the last section, G, this is that section that we already also talked about. So if a lot is in an undeveloped area where the roadway is adjacent to that are currently undeveloped or they're dirt, this allows for a variance to defer sidewalks to a later date. So you recall there's been a couple that have come before you that we have recommended no curb and gutter, but required the sidewalks so that the sidewalk area would be basically a placeholder so that it wouldn't get encroached upon by landscaping or whatever. This would allow for a deferral of those sidewalks to a later date. That could be, a couple of years. Because we have a project coming through so that it integrates with the current or with the proposed alignment and grade, or it could be, wait until that area is under an SID to improve not only the sidewalks, but curb and gutter. So with that, to keep this short, happy to answer any questions you have on this amendment to the code. Commissioners, any question?
I have a question on F, Mr. Mayor. So Director Kanopi, we had a variance that came to the council a few years ago. I want to say it was like 2021 or 2022. And the application description for the commission was that it was going to be some minor upgrades to a house and that the cost of installing the sidewalks was just too much since it was such a small renovation. And so we made the decision that we would only give the variance to, it was on a corner lot, to one side of the street until the neighbors put in their sidewalk, and then that's what we have to go in. And what we found out later was that it was actually not a well, I don't know if the whole commission had up. I had a discussion with Director Kanopke because I walked by and the entire house was gone and they rebuilt the house on existing foundation. But is there any, does F now do anything for us to be able to ensure that we are getting accurate information as to whether it's a, small renovation or leveling?
So, Mayor and Commissioner, yes. In the previous code, the reason that was put in there was Commission City Manager at the time when that was amended didn't want a kitchen renovation to trigger those. So it was being made. This one with the building permit as they're submitting, we'll be able to check that building permit to see what improvements they're doing. And again, it's not our intention that if they're installing, having new wiring run or new plumbing run to trigger this, but if they're in your example, tearing down the whole house except for the foundation wall, maybe a wall, and then rebuilding the house, yes, we would note that, and then that would go into our staff report to the city manager.
All right. Any other questions for Director Knappe?
Mr. Mayor?
Please go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And sorry, I'm getting a little echo here. And Director Knopke, just a question, and I don't need exact numbers, and I don't know if this is something you know, but it has been my observation over the past couple of years that we get a lot of variance requests. And I'm wondering if there are any numbers on how many people or percentages of people requesting variances, because I think my only concern is that with new section B, the language is still, unusual conditions or strict adherence to this chapter would cause undue and extreme hardship. I still feel like that's a bit vague. And I'm concerned about the number of variances that are requested and, thinking about what we might do to perhaps reinforce that a variance is exceptional and not the norm, because again, the numbers I've seen suggest that it is almost the norm to apply for a variance.
Mayor Commissioner, I don't have those numbers on how many variances, but part of the reason for rewording the section A to include the city aims for boulevard sidewalks to allow for the traffic calming, separation, and winter snow storage. That was basically stating the city's intention that the rule going to be boulevard sidewalks. Exception would be, but if they're still concerned that the item B conditions, I can definitely work with the city attorney and to shore up that so that it's more of the variance is the exception versus.
I would welcome just an opportunity to see what other language we might put in there. Again, just to strengthen the sort of position that a variance is exceptional. Thank you.
I think it's worth thinking about. This isn't going to solve updating this language right now. I think it's really important, but we rarely hear about variances being requested for someone who's on the sidewalk loan list, or so I mean, it's normally folks who don't want to frequently don't want to either pay to put in a sidewalk or they don't want to have to give up more space for a boulevard. Rarely do we have anyone who's actually in one of our city programs that's asking for a variance. And so I wonder if we get to the point of a sidewalk maintenance or installation district or some other funding mechanism, are the variances actually going to go down because the cost is not shared amongst more people than just a sole homeowner?
Mayor and Commissioners, I think we can reword that section B a bit and make it a little bit more. This is going to be the exception. We do take into consideration the character of the neighborhood. So if the entire street, half the street is curbside already, with boulevard in the rest, we may or may not be the best course of action. We also realize that there's properties in town that are on a hillside. So to put in a sidewalk and a boulevard, we push that sidewalk and boulevard into that hillside, which would require, a retaining wall and other things. So we realize that, and all those would be taken into consideration in the staff report before we report it to our recommendation to the city manager if this is passed. Because we do recognize that. And like I told you before, with our new software, we're going to try to identify those areas and come before you with a specific policy so that it's not a case by case basis. We'll identify those areas or those conditions and then have an appropriate policy to just work off of. And that way, a developer or a homeowner going in, if they know they're within the policy boundary, they know that this is the policy of the city.
Any other comments from the commission? Do we have any public comments on this topic? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission,
Please.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioners, my name is Matt Kuntz, and we're excited about building our lot on 870 Elizabeth Street, and we're been told by city staff that we fit pretty well into this, and the reason for it is it's, if you look at the second page, there is a page that drops off of Elizabeth Street, and the kids have even like made a little park down there. It's and that is the sidewalk that we're supposed to build along Elizabeth Street where that gully is. And the builder said that they didn't really know the best way to connect to a street that doesn't exist. And then the engineers also struggled to talk about that. We were a little bit worried about having a sidewalk ran next to that gully for people falling off it, but then during the second to last big snowstorm, there was a delivery truck that almost tumbled down the gully, and that was when I realized if we have a sidewalk and a boulevard, it's gonna look more like a street to a lot of people that don't know the chance that we have cars or trucks stuck in that gully because they thought it was a street. So yeah, we would sure love to have to wait until the street was done. We do hope that Elizabeth Street gets completed. We would love to pay for a sidewalk there, and we'll sign whatever it takes. But we are worried about having that sidewalk to the gully, and we think that Director Konopke's recommendations will help us make the right deal with the city. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Do we have any others on this topic? Yes, sir.
I just echo, my name is John Satry. I'm here representing my sister Kay Satry, who is building a house at 914 State Street in similar circumstances that Matt described. So it sounds like your item G as amended or inserted will take care of our situation. And as Matt said, Kay is more than would like to see sidewalk there in the future. She just wants to be able to put it in at the right elevation when a road is in there.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments on this topic? Madam Clerk?
I have no public comment online.
Okay. Thanks. All righty. Is there anyone?
Very briefly here.
Please go ahead.
Can we make sure that the commission gets colored copies of all of the final proposals? Right?
Oh. Okay. Getting back to the agenda. Is there anyone from the public wishes to address the commission? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Okay. Commissioners? Okay. Mr. Manager, do you have your directives?
I do, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Without further ado, this meeting is adjourned.